Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are jumping straight into a story that honestly feels like it's ripped from a thriller novel.
Yeah.
It's all about identity, massive deception, and an international fugitive hunt. But the thing is, it's all true. Every alias, every bizarre claim, it's all documented. So here's the premise, and it's a wild one. What happens when a man, known widely in New England as Nicholas Alahverdian, a really vocal child welfare advocate, suddenly dies? Supposedly from terminal non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Right. Big news at the time.
Exactly.
Right.
Only to be found 2 years later, alive and well, half a world away, claiming he's actually an Irish orphan named Arthur Knight.
It sounds completely unbelievable.
Yeah, it really does. Our sources for this deep dive today detail this whole saga, decades long, of this one individual. Nicholas Alahverdian, Nicholas Rossi, Nicholas Brown. He had quite a few names.
At least half a dozen, yeah.
Our mission here is really to unpack all these layers of deception. We're going to trace his path from a troubled youth who really weaponized his own trauma for political clout through a pattern of escalating crimes, sexual assault, financial fraud, right up to this global manhunt that finally ended with his extradition and just recently, in 2025, his rape convictions in Utah.
And what's truly fascinating or maybe disturbing is the sheer audacity, the commitment to these fabricated identities. I mean, this wasn't just changing his name on a driver's license. This was a full-blown theatrical production designed to beat the system. He manipulated the media, attacked judges, even, get this, reportedly edited his own Wikipedia page after he supposedly died.
No way.
Yes, trying to control the narrative from beyond the grave, so to speak.
That's something else.
But despite years of, well, pretty successful evasion, the one thing he couldn't escape was his past. Specifically, DNA evidence, linked to crimes over a decade old. That turned out to be the truth he just couldn't outrun.
So we're going to look at how he played this long game, legally, psychologically, right up until those guilty verdicts came down last year in Utah.
Yeah.
Okay, so to really understand the scale of the deception later on, we need to go back to the beginning. To the foundation he built his whole public persona on, his origin story, which was rooted in some pretty severe trauma within the state welfare system.
Exactly. He was born in Providence, Rhode Island, 1987, and the story he consistently told started with this really chaotic family life.
Right. The narrative was always abusive and alcoholic parents.
His birth father apparently had convictions for domestic assault, drug dealing, serious stuff. And because of that environment, he ended up in state care. Became a ward of the Rhode Island Department of Children, Youth, and Families, DCYF.
And right there you have the core elements of his future identity, don't you? The victim, the survivor.
The crusader fighting the system, yeah. And the early diagnoses are also pretty critical here for understanding his methods later on.
What were those?
Well, early on, behavioral and mental health issues were noted. Later, records from Butler Hospital showed diagnoses of attention deficit disorder and, really crucially, narcissistic personality disorder, NPD.
NPD.
And when you look at his actions down the line, the intense need for control, the grandiosity, the utter lack of empathy for victims that NPD diagnosis just hangs in the background, it's chilling, really, considering his life.
And the family conflict itself sounds incredibly complex and violent. There's a report involving his stepfather, David Rossi,
Right.
where Alahverdian himself was described as violent towards his mother, his siblings. It apparently escalated to the point where the stepfather, Rossi, beat Alahverdian, which led to Rossi's arrest for assault.
Although those charges were dropped later, yeah. But that incident seems to be what solidified his removal from the home and his full placement under DCYF care.
And then he basically reframed the system itself as the abuser.
Precisely. He alleged that starting around March 2002, he was put in this notorious night-to-night program.
Yeah.
For 15 months.
15 months as a teenager.
Yeah. Imagine spending your days stuck in a DCYF building, and then every single night you're shuffled off to different shelters. Central Falls, Providence, wherever. Constant instability.
He claimed it wasn't just unstable, but actively harmful. Said he was denied regular schooling, suffered threats, even physical assaults from other kids in the shelters.
And contemporary reports, like from the Providence Journal, often describe that program as inherently stifling. It robbed kids of any kind of normal childhood.
His narrative of systemic abuse continued when they placed him out of state in 2003. Facilities like Boys Town in Nebraska, Manatee Palms in Florida.
Right. And he really pushed the idea that this wasn't for his benefit. He claimed Rhode Island officials sent him away, specifically because he was, quote, a source of information on DCYF. He framed it as punishment for speaking out.
He even testified later that they explicitly forbade him from contacting media, lawyers, even his own caseworker while he was out there. He maintained he suffered torture, beatings, assault, and neglect right up until 2005.
Now here's the ambiguity he always exploited. Rhode Island authorities consistently countered these claims. They stated they had absolutely no records, no corroborating evidence of the abuse he described.
So it was his word against the official record.
Always. He lived in that gray area between a very compelling, traumatic narrative and the verifiable facts. That conflict basically defined his entire life.
But even as a teenager, he clearly had a knack for networking, for finding influential people.
Oh, definitely. At just 14, he got a job as a legislative page in the Rhode Island House and immediately started sharing his DCYF horror stories with politicians. He always seemed to be looking for the biggest possible stage.
And that networking almost changed his life completely, didn't it? A state representative tried to adopt him.
Yes, Representative Brian Coogan. He was apparently so moved by Alahverdian's story that he initiated formal adoption proceedings.
But get this.
Yes.
A judge actually stepped in to warn Coogan off the adoption.
That's right. And this is such a crucial detail, showing how early some people saw the manipulative patterns. Family Court Chief Judge Jeremiah S. Jeremiah essentially predicted his future behavior. He warned Representative Coogan, and the records quote him saying Alahverdian will try to undermine you and turn your family upside down.
Wow. Not just he's troubled, but a specific warning about undermining and destruction.
Exactly. It was a chillingly accurate forecast of how he would operate later in life.
Okay, let's just pause here. So we have this young man who very skillfully uses verifiable trauma, the DCYF experience, to build credibility. It becomes his shield, his political calling card.
Right.
But beneath that, even people within the system, like the judge, saw this deeply manipulative streak really early on. This sets the stage perfectly for what comes next, doesn't it? When that manipulation turns into outright serious crime.
Absolutely. If we look at the period from the mid-2000s onward, what we see isn't just random criminal acts. It's a very consistent, calculated pattern emerging.
Twofold, you said.
Yeah, basically twofold. First, engage in these repetitive, controlling offenses, particularly sexual and domestic abuse. And second, launch these incredibly aggressive legal counterattacks, suing the system, suing his victims, even fabricating evidence, all to control the narrative.
Let's talk about the crimes first, the ones that eventually brought him down years later. The sexual offenses started pretty early.
They did. The earliest reported accusation we know of, noted by the Daily Beast, dates back to 2006. He was 18, met a woman online. She alleged constant pressure for sex, then threats, and ultimately rape when she resisted.
And she didn't report it at the time.
No, she didn't, which sadly is very common in these kinds of coercion cases. It just shows the immediate psychological grip he seemed to establish.
Okay, then the next major case, the one that landed him on the sex offender registry that was in Ohio in 2008 under the name Nicholas Rossi.
That's the one. At Sinclair Community College, convicted of public indecency and sexual imposition, the court records are quite graphic, describe him aggressively cornering a student in a stairwell, groping her, masturbating.
Right. I remember the chilling detail where he apparently told her, "I'm almost done, don't be a bitch."
Yeah, just awful. And that conviction meant he had to register as a sex offender, which, predictably, he immediately tried to overturn.
How did he try to fight it?
This is where his digital dishonesty really comes into play. He filed for a retrial, his evidence, an alleged MySpace post from the victim where she supposedly admitted she lied about the assault.
A MySpace post?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yes, but it backfired spectacularly. A computer forensics expert analyzed the post.
Yeah.
Testified at a hearing that the post was almost certainly fabricated. Said with 90% certainty it had been altered or just completely made up.
So his whole defense was based on digital forgery?
Pretty much. High-tech gaslighting, essentially. And he didn't stop there. His legal strategy became pure offense. He started suing the institutions he blamed. Sinclair College, the Dayton Municipal Court, claiming they mishandled his case.
Were those suits successful?
No, they were dismissed in 2013. But the most telling move, I think, was when he sued his Ohio victim for libel.
He sued the woman he assaulted.
Yes! Think about the audacity. Not only did he assault her and try to frame her digitally, but he dragged her back into court because she had apparently described him as crazy.
And his reason for suing her? Wasn't it something truly bizarre?
Oh, completely grandiose. He claimed she ruined his life, and then, unbelievably, he compared her actions, just her calling him crazy, to the September 11th terrorist attacks.
That's That's beyond narcissistic.
It's textbook NPD projection, isn't it? Elevating his own perceived slight to a national tragedy while simultaneously trying to bully the victim into silence. The court saw through it, dismissed the claim in 2014, finding it totally without merit. But the intent was crystal clear: destroy anyone who challenges him.
This pattern of creating these impressive but ultimately fake facades carried over into his academic claims too, right? The Harvard scholar thing.
Ah, yes, the Harvard connection, which was, let's be clear, tenuous at best. He was taking some extension program classes, basically night school, in comparative literature.
So not exactly a tenured professor.
Not even close. And when Harvard eventually found out about his sex offender status in 2012, they cut ties fast. He was administratively withdrawn.
And losing that academic validation seemed to trigger another shift. He pivoted towards men's rights advocacy.
Yeah, it seems like it. The traditional path was closed, so he channeled that energy elsewhere. Started offering legal advice despite having zero qualifications to groups like A Voice for Men,
which the Southern Poverty Law Center labels a hate group.
Correct. So he essentially became this sort of figurehead for incels and disgruntled men, presenting himself as a self-taught legal guru, all while actively breaking the law himself by failing to register as a sex offender in multiple states. He was basically a ticking legal time bomb.
And this controlling behavior was just as evident in his personal life, his marriages.
Absolutely terrifyingly so. His first marriage, 2010, lasted 6 months. Ended with his wife getting a restraining order, which he then repeatedly violated.
And wasn't there a domestic assault arrest around the same time?
Yes, also 2010. Pawtucket police report details him slapping a woman, knocking her down, holding her down. When they arrested him, he was so aggressive in the police cruiser, hitting his head on the bars, that they had to pepper spray him. He pleaded no contest to that charge, basically admitted guilt.
Then the second marriage in 2015. Met her through a Mormon singles ward. He claimed he'd converted.
Another persona. That one lasted 7 months. And the divorce details are deeply disturbing. The court found him guilty of gross neglect of duty and extreme cruelty.
What did that involve?
His ex-wife testified he threatened her with a knife, controlled everything, her clothes, her appearance, even confined her to the house at times.
And there was a financial angle, too, wasn't there?
Always seems to be. He owed her $52,000 he'd borrowed for some supposed community service agency he was starting, which of course never materialized. He just leveraged whatever persona he was wearing, academic, victim, devout husband, to extract money and exert control.
It established this clear pattern: create a new identity, gain trust, exploit, abuse, and then attack when challenged.
Exactly. High-stakes persona shifts. But the core criminal behavior control, manipulation, abuse remained constant.
Which brings us back to that central question. How on earth did this guy, with this documented history, also manage to become this respected, even influential child welfare advocate back in Rhode Island?
That paradox, maintaining two completely contradictory public lives, is really the core of the Alahverdian mystery. The child welfare advocacy was the perfect cover.
A shield, essentially.
Absolutely. It gave him this veneer of unimpeachable morality. It made people, especially politicians and the media, perhaps willing to overlook the less savory parts of his past, like the sex offender status or the domestic violence issues.
So he comes back to Rhode Island in the early 2010s, rebranding himself as this crusader.
Actively seeking out reporters, politicians, always ready with a compelling quote about the system that supposedly failed him.
He even founded an organization, Nexus Government.
Yes, to lobby specifically for abused children. And you know what? He was remarkably effective at it. Oh, yeah. He used his own story so convincingly that he actually inspired state representatives to propose real legislation, bills aimed at restricting DCYF from sending kids to out-of-state facilities, exactly the kind of places he claimed he was abused in.
Wow. So he got actual political wins?
Major wins. It cemented his image as this powerful, necessary voice for reform.
And his legal skills weren't just for attacking victims. He managed to use his advocacy to settle his own lawsuit against DCYF.
Yes, the federal suit he filed in 2011. And this is a fascinating detail showing his financial acumen, or maybe just his manipulative skill. In 2013, he agreed to drop the lawsuit.
In exchange for?
In exchange for Rhode Island waiving a $200,000 lien they had against him for medical expenses incurred while he was in foster care.
So wait, he sued the state, then got them to drop a massive debt he owed them in return for dropping his suit.
Essentially, yes. It was a huge financial victory for him, and it also implicitly bolstered his narrative. It looked like the state was admitting some fault, or at least wanted him to go away quietly.
So he's racking up these political and financial victories, all built on this victim narrative. While at the same time, he's collecting restraining orders and facing abuse allegations.
Yeah.
How did the politicians who worked with him reconcile that? What did they say later?
Their reflections are really telling. Former representatives used words like brilliant, but also unequivocally dangerous.
Dangerous how?
Well, one source flat out accused him of swindling a lot of people and, crucially, of using threats, specifically threatening lawmakers with false accusations, rape, assault, if they didn't give him money.
That's the exact same tactic he used against his Ohio victim.
Yeah.
Now aimed at politicians.
Precisely. Weaponizing the criminal complaint was his go-to move. Another lawmaker mentioned how he relentlessly pressured her for money. When she refused and told him, get a job, he apparently knew exactly how to hurt you with words. He understood psychological leverage and how to exploit people's vulnerabilities, especially their public reputations.
Okay, so this brings us to the tipping point. The moment when these two parallel lives finally collide, forcing him to make his most drastic move yet. While he's running this complex advocacy and scamming operation, the justice system finally catches up.
The clock really started ticking in 2017. Utah began a major initiative to clear its backlog of untested sexual assault kits. A nationwide push, really, great for victims seeking justice.
But terrible news for Alahverdian.
Exactly, because in 2018, that initiative hit pay dirt. A kit from a 2008 assault in Utah got tested, and the DNA matched the DNA he was forced to provide back in 2008 because of the Ohio sexual imposition conviction.
Wow, the system worked, just slowly.
The power of the archive. Physical evidence spanning a decade finally linked Nicholas Rossi, his Ohio alias, to this older, much more serious crime in Utah. A sealed arrest warrant for first-degree rape was issued in September 2020.
And at the same time, the FBI was closing in on him for something else?
Yes, financial fraud. And not small-time stuff. He became aware they were investigating him for identity theft on a massive scale.
What exactly?
Opening 22 credit cards, all under the name of his former foster father. He'd run up almost $200,000 in debt.
$200,000.
So the financial walls were closing in, the sexual assault warrant was waiting. Both streams were converging right on him.
This is it, the trigger point. With the FBI on his tail for fraud, a sealed rape warrant out of Utah. Just skipping the country wasn't going to cut it this time, was it?
Apparently not. He needed to disappear completely, permanently. And he chose the most theatrical, most unbelievable exit strategy imaginable. Faking his own death from terminal cancer.
Okay, so the Vanishing Act kicks into high gear in early 2020. Knowing the authorities are getting close, Alahverdian starts proactively contacting his media contacts, right?
Yes, the ones he'd carefully cultivated over the years. And he wasn't just mentioning illness. Sources say he insisted they publish the news that he'd been diagnosed with terminal non-Hodgkin lymphoma and severe heart disease for good measure.
Laying the groundwork for the tragedy.
Precisely. Preempting his disappearance. And then, barely a month later, February 29th, 2020, Leap Day, no less news outlets report his death.
Based on what? Not an official death certificate, surely.
No. Based on anonymous family testimony, we still don't know exactly who, and a pre-written obituary that suddenly appeared. The timing is just perfect, right as the fraud and rape investigations are heating up.
And the story was maintained by this mysterious Widow Louise.
Right. This anonymous figure who communicated with reporters claimed he'd been cremated, ashes scattered at sea, the whole 9 yards. But crucially, she refused to provide any concrete details or documentation.
Why not? What was the excuse?
Always cited vague threats, kept the location of his supposed death deliberately murky, maybe Quebec, maybe Switzerland, maybe Ireland. It was designed to be completely unverifiable. A ghost story for the digital age.
But the police smelled a rat almost immediately.
They did. A Rhode Island priest, Father Bernard Healy, was contacted by the supposed widow about holding a memorial mass. Police actually intervened, warned the priest, look, this guy Alahverdian is a fugitive. We think he faked his death.
And didn't the priest notice something odd about the caller? The widow?
Yes. This is a key detail. Father Healy reported the caller had a very high-pitched English woman's accent. Police initially wondered if it was Alahverdian himself using some kind of voice disguiser.
A voice disguiser, like in a spy movie.
Shows you how bizarre they thought this was from the start. But forensic analysis later revealed the truth wasn't quite so technologically advanced.
What did they find?
They analyzed recordings of Widow Louise's voice and matched it, not to Alahverdian, but to Miranda Knight, the woman he married right around the time he supposedly died.
So his new wife was in on it from the start, posing as the grieving widow.
It seems that way. The voice analysis pinpointed her specific Bristol accent. It confirmed the whole thing was a coordinated domestic deception. He married her in South Bristol, England in early 2020, no family present apparently, and just started living under the name Arthur Knight, or sometimes Nicholas Brown Knight.
Moving to the UK or Ireland, his lawyer even predicted that would make extradition much harder.
A calculated move. It requires international cooperation, slows everything down.
But even on the run, under a new identity, he couldn't stop the scams, could he?
Apparently not. The core behavior didn't change. Posing as Nicholas Knight Brown, he immediately defrauded a Canadian businesswoman, Nafskika Antaipas, promised PR work for her vegan TV show, took $40,000.
And delivered nothing.
Delivered nothing.
Yeah.
And when she confronted him and ended things, what did he do? Defaulted straight back to his pattern, abuse and threats. The narcissism just wouldn't let him lay low, even when his freedom depended on it.
By 2021, he's living in Glasgow, Scotland, and not exactly keeping a low profile for a dead man.
Not at all. Claiming to be a professor at the University of Glasgow, sporting an English accent, mustache, blonde hair.
A professor. Did the university confirm that?
No, that seems to have been another fabrication. A neighbor's comment really summed it up perfectly. For someone who was on the run, he really liked to draw attention to himself.
It's that core conflict again, isn't it? The need for attention, the grandiosity, overriding basic fugitive common sense.
Absolutely. The NPD demands recognition, even under a fake name and hiding.
But wait a minute. If he was sophisticated enough to fake his death, involve his wife, maybe even use voice tricks, why was he so sloppy with his digital footprint? Cell phone records, iCloud account. Wasn't that incredibly risky?
It's the great contradiction here, isn't it? He was a master manipulator of external narratives, obituaries, media reports, political connections, but he completely failed at basic digital hygiene. His internal, everyday digital life was wide open.
Like he couldn't resist documenting his own fabricated life.
Perhaps. Even his former foster mother suspected the obituary was fake just from the writing style. It was so flattering, so clearly his voice. That same blind spot, he couldn't stop managing his own image, his own legacy.
And the Wikipedia editing. That's just wild. Editing his own page after his death.
Allegedly, yes. According to a Wikipediocracy investigator, accounts linked to him were active post-February 2020, trying to remove his picture, trying to debunk information that questioned his death. He was literally trying to curate his own story from the afterlife.
So the fugitive life, the grand deception, finally comes crashing down in late 2021. And it wasn't an informant or shoe leather detective work that found him, was it?
Nope. It was technology. Plain and simple. The FBI tracked him through his cell phone records and, critically, his iCloud account, which apparently contained a wealth of information documenting his new life as Arthur Knight in Scotland.
So he's finally located. Where did they arrest him?
At the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow, December 2021. He was actually in there getting treatment for a severe case of COVID-19.
And even then, caught in a hospital bed, he stuck to the story.
Absolutely. Insisted he was Arthur Knight. But the physical evidence was immediate and undeniable. Fingerprints were a perfect match to Nicholas Alahverdian Rossi. Tattoos also matched known records.
Though investigators noted some scarring, like he tried to remove them.
Exactly, suggesting he knew they were identifying marks and made some attempt, probably crude, to alter or obscure them.
So identification is confirmed. But instead of giving up, his strategy just shifts, right, from evasion to obstruction.
Total obstruction. He then embarked on this multi-year campaign of theatrical resistance against extradition back to the U.S. The court hearings became, well, a circus.
How so? What did he do?
Journalists covering it described it as surreal. He'd give these long, rambling monologues, stage questionable medical episodes collapsing, claiming seizures, put on these bizarre theatrical outbursts. Anything to delay.
Denying he was Rossi the whole time.
Completely. Claimed it was all mistaken identity. He even came up with the truly outlandish excuse that someone must have tattooed him while he was unconscious in the hospital bed to frame him.
Seriously, that was his explanation for the matching tattoos.
That was the claim. Utterly unbelievable, but he stuck to it. He faked seizures so often that doctors eventually had to formally assess him and confirm to the court, no, he's fit, he's faking. The prosecutor basically said, look, it's obvious this man is trying every trick in the book to delay these proceedings.
And his antics weren't just in court, right? He got in trouble at the hospital, too.
He did. In August 2022, he was actually convicted separately in Scotland for threatening and abusing NHS staff. Why? because they were trying to discharge him after his COVID treatment, and he didn't want to leave the relative safety of the hospital for court.
Unbelievable. And the courtroom appearances themselves became part of the spectacle.
Oh, definitely. He started showing up in a wheelchair, wearing a black robe, sometimes a kippah.
Kippah.
Yes, claiming he'd converted to Judaism while in prison. Another layer of identity manipulation, perhaps trying to curry favor or sympathy, or just add another layer of complexity and delay.
Did he try to play the victim card even in prison?
Seems like it. He actually claimed to the court that other prisoners at HM Prison Edinburgh were taunting him by constantly singing John Denver's Leaving on a Jet Plane.
Okay, that's darkly funny in a way.
It speaks volumes, doesn't it? His notoriety, his theatrical plight, even his incarceration was framed as part of this grand dramatic narrative where he was the persecuted hero.
But eventually the sheer weight of evidence had to prevail. The Scottish courts finally had enough.
They did. After months, maybe years of these delays, the Edinburgh Sheriff Court ruled definitively in November 2022. Based on fingerprints, tattoos, photos, the evidence was overwhelming. The man calling himself Arthur Knight was Nicholas Rossi. The court dismissed his excuses as outlandish and bizarre.
And the extradition was finally approved.
The Scottish government signed off in October 2023. And after all that drama, all that resistance, he was finally put on a plane back to the U.S. on January 5th, 2024.
But even landing back on U.S. soil, in Utah to face the charges. The Arthur Knight persona didn't just vanish instantly, did it?
Not immediately, no. Incredibly, upon being detained in Utah, his lawyer actually made a formal request to the judge. Please refer to my client only as Arthur Knight.
And the judge's response?
Denied immediately. Yeah. But it shows the absolute commitment to the lie, right up until the very last possible second. It took another full year of legal reality setting in before he finally dropped the act.
So, after the international chase, the hospital dramas, the courtroom theatrics, the whole Arthur Knight charade, it finally ends. August 2024, he quietly gives up the mistaken identity claim.
It just became untenable. But the big moment, the one everyone was waiting for, came a couple of months later, October 16th, 2024, at a bail hearing. He formally, on the record, admitted it. Admitted faking his death, admitted faking his identity.
But knowing him, the admission probably came with a twist, right? A justification.
Oh, absolutely. Vintage Alahverdian. He didn't just say, I lied. He immediately pivoted back to his original trauma narrative, blamed the early abuse. But then he added this new layer.
What was that?
He claimed the reason he faked his death was because he received, and I quote, 2 credible death threats via phone and email from unnamed elected officials with the government of Rhode Island.
Seriously, blaming powerful, unnamed enemies in Rhode Island for forcing him to fake his death.
Exactly. One last desperate attempt to cast himself as the victim, forced into deception to save his own life. It was pure deflection.
Did the prosecutor challenge him on that? Ask him to name names?
Immediately pressed him. Who were these officials? And Alahverdian refused. Claimed naming them would just, quote, stoke the fire they've had to continue their actions against him.
Convenient.
Very. The judge wasn't buying it. He was deemed a massive flight risk, understandably, and bail was denied. The identity games were over.
So with the who is he question finally settled, the path was clear for the actual charges, the 2008 Utah rape cases.
Right. They were tried separately in 2025. There was a brief delay when he insisted on representing himself pro se, which is often seen as another delay tactic, but that didn't last long.
And the trials themselves. Was the evidence complex?
The core evidence was brutally simple. The DNA match. Irrefutable. Connecting him directly to those 2008 assaults, and the juries agreed.
Guilty verdicts in both cases.
Guilty in both. First in Salt Lake County in August 2025, then the second conviction in Provo in September 2025. After nearly 2 decades, justice finally caught up on those specific crimes.
And the sentencing for the first conviction, 5 years to life. Can you unpack what that means in Utah? Indeterminate sentencing.
Yeah, Utah uses indeterminate sentencing for serious felonies like this. It's quite significant. It means the judge sets a minimum 5 years, but the maximum is potentially life in prison.
So who decides when or if he ever gets out?
Not the judge. It'll be up to the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole. They'll periodically assess him, his behavior in prison, his psychological state, the risk he poses. Given his documented history of extreme narcissism, profound lack of remorse, constant deception, repeated violations, the chances of that board deeming him rehabilitated and safe for release seem, well, extremely low.
So it's a powerful form of closure, really.
It is. Legally, it closes the book on a man who didn't just commit crimes, but who mastered the art of weaponizing his own life story. He used real trauma as a mask, complex fraud for income, and constant identity shifts as his shield.
But at the end?
In the end, the physical truth of what he did, captured in that DNA evidence from long ago, was the one fact he couldn't manipulate, couldn't edit, couldn't talk his way out of, couldn't be erased.
Wow. The whole saga of Nicholas Alahverdian or Rossi or Knight or Brown, whatever name you use it, really shows the extraordinary lengths required internationally just to pin down the identity of one incredibly determined, manipulative individual. He didn't just lie like a normal fugitive. He actively weaponized the tools of our modern world. He exploited the media's need for a compelling story. He attacked the justice system with frivolous lawsuits. He manipulated the digital record, apparently even his own Wikipedia page. He used voice disguise, maybe other tech.
He played the system at every level.
He really did. And, we all rely on shortcuts to verify reality, don't we? We trust things like official obituaries, LinkedIn profiles, university websites, news reports, these easily searchable facts.
We assume they're solid.
Exactly. But Alahverdian showed how extensively someone can manipulate those very systems for years, building an entirely fabricated foundation for their life. So it makes you think, what systems of verification do you, listening right now, rely on every day that might actually be vulnerable? Vulnerable to a really dedicated, personalized campaign of deception like his.
It's a slightly uncomfortable thought, isn't it?
It is. What key information in your own world, the stuff you just take for granted as true, might actually rest on a foundation that someone, somewhere, could potentially fabricate?